So I'm going to cover some of the main takeaways I've had from tearing down and rebuilding this motor several times. So it's got what I call frame pieces, three pieces. There's a rear, top, and front piece. A front piece, the switch box is bolted to. They're all secured by these, 3/8 bolts and nuts. They engineered them so that the nuts are captive. So if you get them in there and clamp them in, you can just zip them in with a cordless socket wrench. Makes life so much easier. Just zip, 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 zip. Probably a minute or two to get it all apart. The switch box is just an odd duck. It's like this analog computer. This side of the switch box is kind of the what I would call the controls side of the box. Green is actually the pulsed output from the analog computer. Brown, I believe. Brown, I don't know. Oh, magneto off. That comes from your ignition switch. And then red would be constant 12 volt power, which actually comes off your rectifier and actually comes from your battery. And then the rectifier wire comes down here as AC and is rectified to 12 volts up here. So in theory, you could pull start this engine without a battery on it and it should run and start without issues, supposedly. I've never seen it done. And on this side, this is kind of turns, this is a breakerless ignition, and it kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. The top is actually at the bottom. The button that you're normally used to on like Mercury's or engines, that they replaced that with like a carbon brush on the center contact. So it's almost like you see in an electric drill. It's a piece of carbon puck, and that goes and is attached to the center wire out to the ignition, the high voltage output on the ignition coil. I had a heck of a time here on these two wires. This one had faded so much that it used to be white but it had turned brown, so I didn't know which was which. Just remember, white, black, brown is the order. White, black, brown. If you can, usually you can identify the black wire coming out of the distributor, and then you just go in order: black, brown, white. And then those are color coded. The white wire goes up to the white, and I believe the white is actually the negative pulse output from, there's actually a switch. Instead of points, there's a set switch and a metal disc that rotates around and generates a pulsed negative output. And that goes into the analog computer. And then again, we've got negative. I think that's magneto off, and then this is white is negative, and then black I think is magneto off, like you would kill an old school lawnmower, right? You know, touching it to frame ground and grounding out the coil. That's what that wire does. So that's what the brown wire does, magneto off. So it's basically you're touching a wire to the frame. To get to the carburetors is not fun. These two bolts come off really easy. They're 1/2 inch. Take a 1/2 inch socket, zip. These I would highly recommend. There's a 3/8 bolt here, but there's a nut underneath here. Again, they're captive, but it's upside down. So the minute you take the bolt out, the nut is going to drop out. So I recommend using like a vise grip to just kind of clamp that nut underneath here in place. And use a 1/2 inch gear wrench, because you're going to have a lot of fun getting to that bolt on the other side. But once you take these two out, this whole plate just flips forward, and I would take these 3 wires off, flip it back over and off to the side, and that gets you access to the carburetors in there. And then for the carburetors, as I found out the hard way, to take off the carburetor, you start with this, unscrew this outlet from the fuel pump, which is a vac operated diaphragm fuel pump. Take that off, and then, and of course you've got this off, you've got this off. There are 2 bolts holding the top of that carburetor bowl, and they are 1/4 inch. I use an extension with a 1/4 inch socket, and that little piece there has actually got a stainless, it's got a stainless mesh fuel filter in it. So what happens is the gas comes through this hose, through that fuel filter, and then there's actually a T built into that cap piece, and it goes through another hose to another carburetor bowl top over here, and you have to remove that carburetor top too. If you don't remove the tops of the bowls, you will never ever get to the studs for the base. Remember, this is a side draft carb, so everything's sideways. So if you don't take that top off, you're not going to have enough clearance to get to these nuts that are securing the carburetors to the engine block. So if you take those nuts off, and again, I think I want to stay there 1/2 inch bolt, 1/2 inch nuts, the whole assembly will actually come off with the choke screens, and everything else will come off as one piece, and you can actually disassemble and just do it at the bench. So way easier. I thought I was gonna have to pull the starter, but no, that's way overthinking things. So I'm gonna stop this video because I want to test fire this thing again now that I've got everything secured and everything looks okay for once.